what advantages does the Pandas library have over other analytics libraries that somebody might have as options in Python?
So I think Pandas is kind of one of the big advantages is that you're going to find it also everywhere. So it kind of has that like market share advantage. If you need to be able to use it in one spot and go somewhere else, you're going to find lots of examples, lots of resources, a big community behind it. And it's also, because it's been around for a while, it's well tested. You can trust that it's going to work, it's going to get the job done. And I find it to be especially great if you're just prototyping things or just exploring initially. And it's a great way to get started with your analysis.
Yeah, very good reasons. And it's fun, easy to use. We had Wes McKinney in episode number 523. He was the original creator of Pandas. And he hasn't been working on Pandas for several years now. And he described to us in that episode that one of the key reasons behind that was because as data sets have become larger and larger and larger over the years, the kinds of data sets that we're expected to work with as data scientists have grown exponentially larger. And so we're seldom working with data sets on a single machine these days. And so he started working on the Apache Arrow project. So he launched this new project that so in the same way that you say everybody uses Pandas, so even this Apache Arrow project, it has a Pandas-like syntax because every data scientist knows how to use it pretty much. And so the advantage of Arrow, though, is that it allows you to easily, in the back end, have multiple devices working simultaneously on the data that you're working on, which is harder in Pandas until very recently. So just a month ago at the time of this episode's release, it's fresh news for us at the time of recording, is Pandas 2.0. And so it's so fresh, I don't know very much about it yet, but I do understand that one of the main ideas behind Pandas 2.0 is that in the back end, instead of using NumPy, which is optimized just for a single device, it uses Wes McKinney's Apache Arrow in the back end. So Pandas now is extensible over multiple devices. And so maybe someday in the future, Stefanie, we'll have a third edition of your book in Pandas 2.0.
Maybe.
And the good news is, so from the little bit that I do know about Pandas 2.0, is that apparently most code will still work the same. So it's supposed to have made really no differences to the front-end API.
It's a relief for me because a big project coming up this weekend is updating all of my content.
Nice. So let's talk about how we use Pandas. It's clearly great for just wrangling data. The data frame structure is native in it. It's actually something that, I don't know, I was an R user before.
I was too.
Yeah. And so data frames were a really convenient way of working with two-dimensional tables of data in R because you can have different data types for each column. So if, before I was using R, I was using Matplotlib. And in Matplotlib, you had to specify the type, at least at that time, of the matrix. And so you could have a float type matrix, and then everything in that matrix had to be float values. But in R, it was cool having these data frames where you could have a column that was text to describe what the row is or to be an ID. You could have column names, and then each column could be a different data type. So you could have a Boolean, like true-false column, and a float column, and an integer column, and a text column, and whatever, all mixed together. And so Pandas allowed you to have that in Python. But so data wrangling is this really core part of working with Pandas. Is there any aspect of data wrangling that you highly recommend to our listeners in Pandas that they might not know about?
I guess a few things come to mind, more than what we initially discussed. So one big thing is chaining. I think the more you use Pandas, the more you will see that just chaining the operations together is going to save you a lot of effort and just make a lot cleaner code. You don't have end up data frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you don't remember which order you ran them or which one you're working with. Assign method, that's going to come big when you're using the chaining. I'm a big fan of that. Most of my code will end up having assign calls at some point. I feel like people maybe aren't so familiar with that
Yeah,
method?
I'm not that super familiar
Oh,
with it. So the chaining thing I get, so that's actually, so going back to my R days even, the dplyr library is great, right?
Yeah.
For chaining operations together. So then it becomes very easy to look at your code, or similar if you can do it in bash with a pipe operator, where you have operation after operation after operation, and it makes it very easy when you come back to your own code or you're reviewing somebody else's code to see, okay, we have this processing pipeline, for example, or this analytical pipeline where instead of having to name a new data table for each step of the way, you just flow very nicely through all of these operations. So it makes for super readable code. So I definitely agree on the chaining as something that everybody should be doing. And Matt Harrison, who we were saying was at that lunch back at ODSC West, he's in episode number 557 of this podcast. It was actually the most listened to episode in 2022. And a big point that he was making is that everybody should be chaining in that episode. The episode was called Effective Pandas, and chaining was his number one thing that people should be doing. But then you mentioned assign.
Assign. So when you're chaining, let's say you want to create a new variable that's based on some other columns in there, and you want to create a new column. That's just part of the flow. You can create 10, you can overwrite 3 all in one call, and then move on.
Cool.
And it works really nicely with if you for some reason want spaces, or let's say you're gonna then do a plot right at the end. So chain all the way to a plot, and you want to have nice labels. You might want to have space instead of an underscore, and you can actually do that if you just put it in a dictionary and then unpack it as you're going. So it's a neat trick to have up your sleeve, save you some steps.
Cool. That sounds awesome. You said you had a few. Were those the...
I think the third one maybe is just plotting, that you can plot in Pandas. I think sometimes people are surprised that that's there. It definitely feels like a natural extension. Now, I will say that because it is such a high level on top of all these other things, sometimes things aren't quite plugged in yet the right way. I have fixed a couple of those.
Personally?
Yes, personally.
Yeah.
So open source contributions. So if someone else finds them, it's your responsibility to fix them.